GoFundMe and saying that he's donated $2,000, posting an Instagram story of the GoFundMe writing, dude's car that got hit by the flying Tesla LOL, and pointing to his donation and comment where he wrote, "Hope you get your justice service. Here's probably all the ad revenue I'll get from my video." But for now, the driver is still unknown, though that hasn't stopped douchebags like Dirty Dom of all people from claiming on TikTok that he was the driver. And even though Choi has tried to rein in that narrative as sort of a clout-chasing narrative on Instagram, you did have the LAPD saying they're considering Dom a person of interest based on the public postings of his account. And I've tried to wrap my head around why Dom would lie about this, though, I mean, one, yeah, clout chasing in general, but two, he probably wants the attention for a reason that's not him being accused of rape. But to Dirty Dom or whoever it is, and I really do hope the truth comes out, you are insanely fucking stupid, and that's why you are our douchebag or douchebags of the day. But yeah, with all of that said, I'd love to know your thoughts on any aspect of that story, whether it be the Alex Choi part, the Dirty Dom, the jump in general, anything and everything. Let me know what you're thinking. And while you may be clickety-clacking that keyboard, I'll say, oh hi, welcome back to the Philip DeFranco Show. I hope you had a good weekend. Buckle up, hit that like button, let's just jump into it. And then let's talk about major updates around the very, very public mess that is going to be the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial that starts in just a month. Right, so for the last couple of years, there have been so many updates, other cases happening on the sidelines, tons of controversies, and people have kind of just wondered, is this trial going to happen? And if so, what is it going to look like? And now, thanks to a new report from Deadline, it appears that we have some answers to those questions. Starting off with, it appears that there is a pretty star-studded witness list that includes the likes of James Franco, Paul Bettany, Elon Musk, as well as reps from Disney, Warner Bros, and the LAPD. And on top of these big names testifying, private correspondence between Depp and Heard and Hollywood stars are going to be laid out publicly. And as far as why some of these people have been called, Depp accused James Franco and Elon Musk of having affairs with Heard, so they're on the witness list and are going to appear in court via video. And then you have Paul Bettany on Depp's witness list, with a report noting the texts between the two were read at a previous trial that showed them talking about burning and drowning Heard, and then Depp specifically saying that he would have sex with her corpse, with that correspondence being on Heard's exhibit list, with her exhibit list also including texts from Jason Momoa and director James Wan, as well as messages with Zack Snyder and more. And for those that don't know, right, all these legal battles stem from the $50 million lawsuit that Depp filed against Heard over an op-ed that she wrote for the Washington Post describing herself as a domestic abuse victim. Heard then later countersued for $100 million, and both have tried and failed to kill the other's suit. But yeah, we have some more information, but ultimately we're gonna have to wait for April 11th. That's when the trial starts in Virginia. And as far as what happens from there, we're gonna have to wait to see, especially because some reports have claimed that the trial will be at least partially televised, but we need to get closer to the date. But with that said, we haven't checked in on this story for a while, so I do want to pass the question off to you. What are your thoughts as now it's actually happening? What are your thoughts on this situation? But from that, I want to take a second to thank the fantastic sponsor of today's show, Keeps. Did you know that 2 out of 3 guys will experience some form of male pattern baldness by the time that they're 35? And maybe you have that friend or that family member that's dealing with hair loss right now, and you don't have to just wait for that to happen to you, because now is the time to do something about it. Keeps helps you stop hair loss before it's too late with a scientific and affordable approach to treatments that are up to 90% effective at reducing and stopping further hair loss. And Keeps offers generic versions of the only 2 FDA-approved hair loss products that are out there, so some of you may have already tried them before, but probably never at this price. And you get these products delivered directly to your door. That means no more going in person to the doctor's office for your prescription, saving you both valuable time and money. So if you're ready to take action and prevent hair loss, go to keeps.com/DeFranco, or just click that link in the description to get 50% off your first order. And then today is the start of one of America's biggest circuses, and that is a Supreme Court Justice confirmation hearing. It has now officially begun, and in the hot seat you have 51-year-old Ketanji Brown Jackson, who, if confirmed, will be taking over for Justice Breyer. And for those who don't remember, she was picked as a nominee by President Joe Biden last month as part of his promise to appoint a black woman to the highest court. While many praised Biden's commitment to making the court more reflective of America's demographics, there were some who questioned the legitimacy of limiting his pool of potential nominees solely based on race and sex. But this is also a matter that Senate Republicans, while some were speaking out, have largely been silent on. And reportedly, they are afraid of how it would look in the polls if the public assumes that they're opposing Jackson solely because of her race. Or I mean, just take a look at how bluntly Senator Susan Collins put it last month, saying the idea that race and gender should be number 1 and number 2 criteria is not as it should be. On the other hand, there are many qualified black women for this post, and given that Democrats regrettably have had some success in trying to paint Republicans as anti-black, it may make it more difficult to reject a black jurist. And so instead, what we've seen are Republicans pushing a narrative that Jackson's backed by so-called dark money groups, right? Talking about organizations such as Demand Justice. And this is how Senator Charles Grassley put it this morning when referencing Jackson's past appointments.
The Obama White House records indicate that a co-founder of the Demand Justice played an important role in Judge Jackson's nomination to the Sentencing Commission and the District Court. The Demand Justice co-founder even interviewed Judge Jackson about the nomination to the Sentencing Commission. It would be helpful to know what Demand Justice co-founder learned from that process and why they strongly support Judge Jackson.
However, there is a glaring issue with this narrative, and that's because all the Supreme Court justices lately have been pushed with the help of dark money groups. This is true whether it is a liberal or a conservative justice, and while demand justice appears to be backing liberals, on the conservative side you have the Federalist Society. But also, beyond having a hand in the nomination process, these groups don't seem to have any power over a justice once they're on the bench. Because once they're appointed, justices are pretty much unshackled, and we've kind of seen that to a certain degree with Kavanaugh and Barrett becoming what's been referred to as the ideological center of the court, voting against other conservative members at a higher rate. But all that said, the questions won't just be about alleged ties to demand justice. There will also be plenty of questions about her judicial record and views. And so as far as who is Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, I mean, some of the things we know: she's from Miami, Florida. She's been serving on the Federal Circuit Court in D.C. In total, she's been a federal judge for about 9 years, and before that was a clerk for Breyer, a public defender, and had a private practice. And the thing is, the bulk of the Senate already knows a lot about her, including all her appointments in the past. I mean, this will be the 4th time the Senate has scoured her record, with her judicial philosophy pretty well attested to, with over 600 decisions across various types of cases. And as for her record, you can expect to hear a lot about her decisions on crime, which Republicans claim she is weak on. Where leading up to the hearings, you had Senator Josh Hawley going around saying, "The facts are the facts. Judge Jackson's sentence below the sentencing guidelines for every single child porn offender that has come before her," and in an op-ed pointing to a case where she sentenced a man uploading this type of content to just 3 months in prison rather than the normal 8 to 10 years. However, we've seen pushback against this from the likes of White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki, pointing out that, quote, "In the vast majority of cases involving child sex crimes, the sentences Judge Jackson imposed were consistent with or above what the government or U.S. probation recommended. But beyond that, there will also likely be scrutiny about her past work, with Republicans already setting up questions about her decision to represent detainees at Guantanamo Bay, with Senator John Cornyn telling CNN, if somebody is assigned to a job as a young lawyer, you don't get to pick and choose your clients. But if you're volunteering for it because you're a true believer, that's a little different." However, this could also be flipped to be a testament to how much she believes in the constitutional right that everyone get fair representation. Right, for example, most praised President John Adams for his decision to defend the British soldiers from the Boston Massacre when he was an attorney due to this exact same belief. But all that said, this entire process will likely take some time, with the hearing alone set to last 4 days. So yeah, from that, we'll just have to watch, wait, and see if Jackson will be our newest Supreme Court justice. And then let's talk about the awful, tragic news coming out of southern China today, with flight MU-5735, a passenger plane carrying 132 people, taking off this afternoon local time for a flight to Guangzhou. But an hour and a half later, the airport's app marked the plane out of reach, and that's because it disappeared. But we now know what happened. The plane nosedived into a mountain in Guangxi province, all but certainly killing everyone on board. With aviation data showing that the plane was cruising around 30,000 feet when it suddenly plummeted, crashing into the earth around 90 seconds later, catching fire and setting the surrounding forest ablaze, which firefighters who first arrived at the site quickly extinguished, and around 600 more emergency responders reportedly going to help, though they found no signs of survivors. And so as of now, the authorities are still investigating what happened, with President Xi personally ordering them to look into any safety hazards and calling for an all-out effort in the rescue operation. Also, as far as the plane at the center of all this, it's a China Eastern Airlines Boeing 737-800, which, just to be clear, is different from the 737 MAX that made headlines when faulty software brought 2 of them down a little over 3 years ago. Or the 737-800 is an older model, though both of them are part of Boeing's next-generation narrow-body jets. And so for Boeing, this is another deadly instance for a company that's already paid $2.5 billion in a fine to the U.S. Justice Department early last year to resolve criminal charges that it conspired to defraud the FAA. And following this crash, some of the things we've seen: Boeing stock tanking Monday around 5% by the time that the market opened, and now China Eastern Airlines grounding all of its 737-800s, as well as setting up an emergency hotline for the families of those who were on board and giving its condolences. But really, the last thing I'll touch on is how rare this is for China. They actually have a good record with aviation safety, with the last major accident happening 12 years ago. And that because the country's air safety standards have improved dramatically since a string of crashes back in the 1990s. But ultimately, with this story, we wait to see what information we can get from the investigation, what we can learn, and in the meantime, our well wishes go to those affected. And then, of course, let's talk about updates in Ukraine as Russia's war enters its 26th day. As the fighting continues across the region, we've seen Russia continuing what appears to be nothing more than just senseless attacks on civilian infrastructure and neighborhoods. On Sunday, Russia launched a missile strike on a major shopping center in Kyiv, leaving much of the area in rubble and killing at least 8 in what's been described as one of the strongest bombings of Ukraine's capital since the beginning of the invasion. And with this, you had the mayor of Kyiv imposing a curfew on the city, requiring all residents of the capital to stay at home or in shelters from 8 p.m. on Monday to 7 a.m. Wednesday, and mandating that all stores, pharmacies, gas stations, and government offices close on Tuesday, with the mayor insisting that the shopping center attack is not a coincidence, saying that Putin wants to starve the civilians to make them pressurize their leaders. Right, and with this latest strike, as well as others on apartment buildings, residents in the capital are worried that if Russian forces continue to close in, Kyiv could see attacks like those in Kharkiv and Mariupol, where Russia has launched onslaughts on civilian populations to make up for slow progress in the region. And that concern is especially heightened as British defense officials have warned that Kyiv remains Russia's primary military objective, and adding that troops are expected to prioritize an attempt to encircle the city in the coming weeks. Also, on the note of of major military objectives. I want to hit on updates in Mariupol. Right after weeks of attacks on the strategic southern port city, we saw Russia yesterday offering an ultimatum saying if the city surrenders, it will allow civilians to